Today's top picks from Reuters Breaking Views. The Eurozone may have dodged the Greek bullet, but there is no relief on Spain. And just what is Chris Hone playing at with Lloyds? Well, with me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breaking Views' Peter Tal-Larsen. Peter, thanks for joining us once again. Let's start with Spain then. It won't be saved without a grand master plan. Well, I've done my homework, I think. Attention from the Greek election took attention from Spain away for, a couple of hours. Spain's been doing everything they've been asked to do. The banks are being bailed out, although there's a second audit in September. Now what?
Well, I think the point we're trying to make really is that Spain has done more or less everything it can really be asked to do to deal with the problem itself. So it's finally got around to dealing with the banks. It's doing quite a lot in terms of austerity and structural reform in terms of Spain. And this hasn't really solved the problem. As you said, the euphoria of the Greek election didn't last very long. Spanish 10-year bond yields are over 7%. The short end is also the yields are also rising quite quickly, and they've got to keep financing themselves. So we're in this state where people are now worrying about a full Spanish bailout. How would that be funded? All those kind of things. And our point really is that this requires, if Spain is going to stay in the Eurozone, this requires the Eurozone to really make some kind of fairly big statement about Spain and about the Eurozone as a whole. And that's really 2 points. First of all is to make it absolutely clear, to make a clear commitment that the Euro project is not reversible, which means fiscal union, banking union, or some combination of the two. That is not going to be a short-term plan, but clearly some kind of commitment that says this is the direction that we are heading is necessary in order to reassure markets, in order possibly to give the European Central Bank some cover to intervene to help countries like Spain. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you also need to do something about the pace of fiscal adjustment in countries like Spain. Clearly, austerity is to a certain extent self-defeating in the sense that it makes deficits worse.
And you get no growth as well.
And you get no growth, exactly. So you need some kind of some kind of commitment that says we will give these countries more time to hit their targets.
But let's be honest, the G20 are unlikely to get anything, and you've got the EU summit next week. Is that enough time? And we seem to be sort of going from summit to summit to summit, and actually we don't really make much progress.
No, and that's been the problem with this whole kind of crisis all along. And obviously there's been a kind of muddling through from one summit to the next. But I think our point is here that the ball is now very much back in the court of the other Eurozone countries, particularly France and Germany, and it really requires something from them. Even if there's nothing concrete that they can deliver straight away, it requires a commitment and a sort of unified commitment to send a clear signal that says...
And politics, very finally, are going to get more complicated because Hollande now got his mandate. Merkel's now thinking next year, I've got to get re-elected. Is that going to split the two down the middle?
Well, that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch. As you say, Hollande is kind of, is now, in theory, he's the most powerful politician in the Eurozone because he's newly elected and he's got a supportive government and a full mandate. So that will be an interesting tension.
OK, let's move on to our second story then. Chris Hone's Lloyds plan isn't pure self-interest. We better explain who Chris Hone is. He's the head of the Children's Investment Fund. He's an activist investor, and he's looking at the contingent convertible debt held by Lloyds and asking them to clarify their position on it. So explain what this is really all about.
Well, Chris Hone, first of all, the reason we pay attention to what he says is because he is the investor who not only blocked the takeover of the London Stock Exchange before the crisis, but also famously basically was the spark that led to the breakup bid for ABN AMRO in 2007. So he has some form in this area. And what he's done is he's written to the Financial Services Authority in the UK about these contingent convertibles that Lloyds owns, and these are bonds that Lloyds issued at the height of the crisis to investors that pay quite a high coupon, 12%, and are in theory convertible into equity in a crisis. But Hone's point is that actually the trigger point at which those convertibles would convert into equity is now so low that Lloyds would have to be basically totally bust for them to be any use. And so he's saying these aren't really any good as capital, loss-absorbing capital, and the regulator is slightly hedging its bets as to whether they should count towards Lloyds' capital. And his point is why don't you just convert those into equity, because it would actually make the bank stronger.
And it's not purely self-interest in terms of making him some money.
Well, people are a bit puzzled by this position, because it seems that he has a position in these notes, and if you think you're holding a note that's yielding 12%, why would you want to convert that into anything? You could just hold it and carry on collecting your coupon for a while. There are a couple of possible explanations. One is that actually he believes that the Lloyd's equity is sort of worth having, that actually, and obviously Lloyd's wouldn't be able to forcibly convert these notes. It would have to make some kind of attractive offer to these note holders, so they would obviously get quite a lot of shares for their notes. So maybe that's one possible explanation. But I think the point we're trying to make is that even though clearly he would profit from this, the broader point is that the UK government has a stake in Lloyd's. Clearly the tensions in the Eurozone are rising, and if there was a need for Lloyd's to take extra capital, it would have to find it from somewhere, probably from the government, and actually converting these notes into ordinary equity might actually be a way of boosting its capital without having to get the government involved.
And a final brief point, is this a precedent for other banks or other institutions within the UK?
Not really, because Lloyd's is the only bank in the UK that has really issued these CoCos. In fact, there are very few of them around. Credit Suisse has some. But we're still, this was originally billed as one of the solutions to solving the capital conundrum in banks, but we're still really waiting for regulators to make it absolutely clear what the criteria are for CoCos, and then to find out whether investors really want to buy them.
Something tells me we'll come back to this story several times again. Peter, thanks very much indeed for that. For more agenda-setting financial insight, watch our US Breaking Views show every day at 12:30 Eastern, 17:30 BST. I'm Nigel Stevenson. This is Reuters.